Welcome to the deep dive. To start us off today, I want you to picture something in your mind.
Mhm.
Imagine a truly beautiful, striking image.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You are looking at a majestic mountain peak right at sunrise. It's piercing straight through this heavy gray layer of morning clouds, and the light is it's blinding.
Like a massive breakthrough.
Right, exactly. But then I want you to look down at the foreground. At the very base of that mountain, there's a vibrant, breathtaking field of yellow flowers, deeply rooted in the dark soil.
Hmm.
Keep that image in your head for a second. You have this incredible picture of sudden illumination where the light violently breaks through the darkness, but it's paired with this quiet, organic, incredibly slow, steady growth in the dirt.
It's a really powerful contrast.
It is. And that balance, the flash of light and the slow, steady growth, that perfectly captures the absolute essence of the material we're unpacking today.
It really is the perfect visual anchor for this deep dive. And what's fascinating here is how relevant that specific tension is for anyone trying to build something enduring right now, regardless of the field they're in.
Right.
We all want the sudden sunrise. We want the instant illumination. But we rarely want to do the slow, tedious work down in the soil.
Which is exactly why today's source material is so compelling. Just for the record, today is Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. And the text we're diving into is a newly published 2026 book. It's called Out of Darkness to Light, a guide to knowing God, growing strong Christian living with purpose.
It's quite a comprehensive title.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground. It's written by Chris R. Philasis.
Mm.
Now, he's a missionary pastor who has spent over 25 years on the ground in the Philippines. He specializes in church planting and missions training. So we're talking about someone with decades of field-tested, highly relational experience.
And I think that background provides crucial context for you as you listen. The framework we're going to examine today, it isn't some theoretical philosophy constructed in a sterile academic environment.
Yeah, no ivory towers here.
Exactly. It's drawn directly from hands-on experience in global conferences, mobilization, and just cross-cultural, messy human environments. He's looking at how people actually change, or frankly, how they fail to change in the real world.
And that brings us to our mission for you today. We are going to thoroughly unpack Philasis' strategic blueprint for spiritual formation. We'll explore how he constructs a very specific argument against a type of faith, or really even a type of life that's based purely on fleeting conversion moments.
We're driven by digital metrics, which is huge right now.
Huge. Instead, he offers a highly structured six-stage roadmap designed for deep, resilient growth. And he's doing this specifically for our current age, an era dominated by artificial intelligence, algorithmic competition, and just constant distraction.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is essentially trying to solve a crisis of formation. He's looking at a cultural ecosystem where you, me, everyone else, we are completely overloaded with information,
Right.
yet we are incredibly starved for actual transformation.
Man, overloaded with information, but starved for transformation. That's the reality. So the book kicks off with a really provocative question. Philasis asks, what happens after someone, quote unquote, prays the prayer?
Mm-hmm.
He's tackling this widespread problem where people experience a genuine spiritual awakening, that sudden mountain sunrise moment we pictured earlier. But then you look at them years later, and their lives remain relationally disconnected, they're anxious, and they're missionally passive.
You're stuck?
Yeah, they had the moment, but they have zero momentum. So why does that happen?
Well, to understand the author's answer, we really have to look at his critique of the modern cultural ecosystem. As we established, we are living in an era defined by digital noise. AI is disrupting how we communicate. Algorithms are constantly competing for our shrinking attention spans.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. And the default cultural operating system right now is to measure success by scale and speed. Philasis argues that the modern church, and really modern individuals in general, have unconsciously adopted these exact cultural metrics of success to evaluate their internal lives.
So it literally becomes a numbers game. We start optimizing for what can be seen and quantified by other people.
Precisely. The book draws a hard line here between what it calls visibility and vitality.
Visibility and vitality.
Right. Visibility is entirely metric-driven. It's about the number of followers you have, the amount of funds you've raised, the size of the platforms you build, or the massive crowds you can gather.
Stuff that looks good on a spreadsheet or a social profile.
Exactly. But vitality, as defined in the text, is about the unseen depth of a person's character. It's about actual observable transformation in how you treat people behind closed doors when there's no audience.
It sounds like the difference between motion and direction. You can be incredibly active, right? You're scrolling, you're attending events, you're sharing content, networking, but you're still completely stagnant on the inside. You are highly visible, but you have absolutely no vitality.
And the book points out a crucial distinction regarding the exact dynamic. It argues that visibility might gather a crowd, but only vitality cultivates character. Activity creates motion, but only intentional formation produces true maturity.
So what does this all mean for the person listening to us right now who just realized they're stuck on that treadmill? They have the visibility, they're doing all the activities, but they just feel hollow. Does the author offer a way out of that cycle, or is it just a critique of the problem?
No, he offers a highly detailed architectural plan to rebuild from the ground up. Velasquez introduces a progressive, six-stage discipleship arc, and it's designed to move a person from that initial flash of light into deep-rooted maturity.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are the stages?
The sequence is very deliberate. It goes awakening, identity, formation, community, mission, and finally leadership.
That is quite the journey. Let's zero in on the second stage for a moment. Identity. Because the book focuses heavily on the shift from what it calls performance-based Christianity to finding identity through union with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And for you listening right now, I want you to think about the psychological weight of performance culture. From the time we're in school, to the workplace, to our social media profiles, we are deeply, deeply conditioned to derive our core worth from our output. If your numbers are up, you're valuable. If your output drops, you're failing.
And this raises an important question. What happens when you take that secular, metric-driven mindset and you apply it to a religious or spiritual framework?
That's got to be disastrous.
The author argues that it leads directly to a hidden form of bondage. You basically have two outcomes. You either end up with immense spiritual pride because your personal metrics look good compared to everyone else.
Like you're winning the religious game.
Yeah. Or you end up in absolute despair when you inevitably fall short.
It's the ultimate hustle culture, just dressed up in religious terminology. So how does the book suggest breaking out of that?
Well, Velasquez leans into the theological core of his framework here. He relies heavily on the Epistle to the Ephesians to argue that a believer's identity must be rooted not in what they achieve, but in their union with Christ. And to illustrate this, the text brings in a profound metaphor from the Gospel of John, chapter 15.
The vine and the branches, right?
Exactly. The concept of the vine and the branches.
Oh, that is a fascinating visual because if I'm remembering the text correctly, the branch doesn't actually do any of the heavy lifting.
And that is the absolute core of the author's point. The text quotes Jesus speaking of abiding, not striving. The biological reality is that a branch does not strain, it doesn't stress, it doesn't hustle to produce a grape. It simply remains connected to the vine.
It just sits there.
Right. The fruitfulness is the natural, inevitable byproduct of that secure connection. So Velasquez argues that when identity precedes activity, when a person is totally secure in that union, all that insecurity and the exhaustive spiritual striving, it just collapses.
It's the complete opposite of how we're taught to operate today. It's this idea that identity is the soil from which all growth organically emerges, rather than a trophy you win through exhaustion.
You beautifully put.
But wait, you mentioned the 6 stages earlier: awakening, identity, formation, community, mission, leadership. We jump from identity, and usually in these kinds of books, I hear people go straight from figuring out who they are to finding a community. But Velasquez has formation sitting right in the middle there. What actually happens in that stage?
I am really glad you caught that because formation is arguably the most uncomfortable stage in the entire blueprint. It is the crucible.
Okay, why is it so uncomfortable?
Because formation is the space between knowing your identity in theory and actually engaging with others in practice. It's essentially an unlearning phase. The book describes it as the intentional restructuring of your internal world.
So you're taking all those toxic habits.
Exactly. The hustle culture, the anxiety, the metric-driven self-worth, and you're slowly, painfully replacing them with new rhythms.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when I hear unlearning habits, I expect some abstract philosophy, maybe some journaling prompts. But the book doesn't leave you with just comforting theology about abiding in the vine. It pivots into highly practical, measurable tools to build that new internal world.
It gets very tactical.
Very. Velasquez introduces this concept he calls structured grace. He provides a very specific 90-day growth blueprint, and it comes complete with 15-minute devotional templates and 30-day discipline trackers.
It is a highly tactical approach to spiritual growth.
I have to push back on this a little bit, though, on behalf of the
Yeah,
listener.
go for it.
Structured grace. That sounds like a complete oxymoron. If grace means unmerited favor, meaning it's a gift, no performance or output required, why on earth do I need a 30-day discipline tracker? Doesn't handing someone a tracking sheet just throw them right back into the performance metrics we were literally just trying to escape?
It's a brilliant paradox, and it's a tension the author completely anticipates. In modern contexts, grace is frequently viewed as a sort of passive permission. It's the idea that because you are accepted, no effort is required on your part. You just sit back.
Right, I'm good. I don't need to do anything.
But Velazquez points to the Epistle to Titus, chapter 2, to argue the exact opposite. He notes that the text explicitly states that grace actively trains believers. It teaches them to renounce ungodliness.
So grace isn't just a pardon, it's actually a curriculum.
That is a great way to frame it. Therefore, structured disciplines like the ones in his 90-day blueprint, they are not legalistic burdens or scorecards to prove your worth to anyone. They are the training wheels of grace.
Okay, that makes sense. The book lists practices like regular scripture meditation, intentional fasting, and Sabbath rest. And it describes these not as chores you check off a list to make God happy, but as ways to create spiritual muscle memory.
Muscle memory, yes.
It's about converting that initial spark of inspiration from the mountain sunrise we talked about into the steady growth of the flower. So if we look at the timeline of this 90-day blueprint, the first 30 days are all about awakening and identity, getting that foundation totally solid. But then, as you move into days 31 to 60, the focus shifts dramatically outward. It moves from isolated faith to what he calls covenant belonging.
And this transition is where the framework fundamentally challenges the modern listener. Velazquez uses the Acts of the Apostles, specifically chapter 2, to describe the social architecture of the early church.
Right.
He argues that the biblical vision of community is not an optional enhancement to your private spiritual life. It's a covenantal necessity.
He's taking direct aim at what people call consumer Christianity here.
Absolutely.
It's the idea that church is just a vendor of religious goods. You know, you show up, you consume a well-produced music set, you listen to an inspiring TED Talk-style sermon, and you leave without anyone knowing your name or your struggles.
And if you don't like the product, you just cancel your subscription and find a different vendor.
Exactly.
But Velazquez argues that covenant belonging demands something entirely different. If consumer Christianity is a subscription service, covenant belonging is more akin to a marriage or a really tight-knit sports team. You can't just walk off the field when it gets uncomfortable.
You're locked in.
You are.
Yeah.
The text notes that this level of belonging requires mutual confession, strict accountability, and even shared suffering within a local body of believers.
Which sounds incredibly messy. In a world where our apps are perfectly designed to be frictionless, we have one-click ordering, we have curated echo chambers where we never have to see an opinion we disagree with. The author is telling us to intentionally step into friction.
Because, as the book argues, sanctification, that deep process of growing in character we've been talking about, it frequently occurs through that very friction. It does not happen in isolation.
Right.
It happens through the incredibly frustrating work of forgiving people who have wronged you, serving people who annoy you, and navigating the profound messiness of shared human life.
Friction
Yeah.
as a tool for growth that completely fixes the script on how we view the difficult people in our lives. It transforms the people around you from being obstacles to your peace into being the actual instruments of your maturity. I mean, you can't learn patience in an empty room.
Precisely. You need the friction to build the muscle.
So for you listening, let's look at the journey so far. We've gone from the initial spark of awakening to finding an identity completely detached from your performance metrics, to unlearning hustle culture in the formation stage, to building spiritual muscle memory through structured grace, to locking arms in a messy covenant community. But what is this all for? Why build all this internal resilience and community architecture?
And that brings us to the final stages of the blueprint: mission and leadership.
Right.
And what's fascinating here is how the book reframes the concept of evangelism and mission. In many modern contexts, evangelism has morphed into a high-pressure recruitment garb. Or even worse, it becomes a form of argumentative aggression, where the goal is just to win a debate and prove the other person wrong.
Yeah, trying to own the other side in the comment section becomes all about dominance.
But Velazquez argues that authentic mission is about relational obedience and deep empathy. The book explicitly states that the light received must become light reflected. It is not about a specialized ministry for a gifted few people on a stage.
It's for everybody.
It's a collective vocation for everyone. And because this mission flows from that secure identity we discussed earlier, the abiding in the vine, it removes the fear-driven silence on one hand and the argumentative aggression on the other. You don't need to win an argument to secure your identity.
You're just sharing what you've experienced, and that leads perfectly into leadership, which he defines in a very specific way. He calls it multiplication over maintenance.
This is a cornerstone of the author's strategy. He references the second epistle to Timothy, chapter 2, verse 2. In that passage, the Apostle Paul tells his mentee Timothy to take the truths he has learned and entrust them to faithful people who will then be able to teach others also.
So it's Paul to Timothy, Timothy to faithful people to others. That is 4 generations of leadership represented in one single sentence.
That is the definition of multiplication. And the book contrasts this with maintenance, which is just trying to keep the machinery of an organization running. Leadership is not about positional dominance or being the person with the microphone. It is about generational impact.
Wow.
The author suggests that a mature believer who never invests in mentoring someone else is essentially truncating the flow of that grace.
I want to tie this back to the very beginning of our conversation, because this concept of mentorship hits differently in 2026. We started by talking about the digital ecosystem, algorithmic competition, and AI disruption. We have all these incredible tools at our disposal. How does the author view the role of technology in all of this multiplication and leadership?
The author's view on technology is incredibly clear and highly cautious. Velazquez acknowledges the reality of digital disruption, but he insists on framing technology as a servant, not a sovereign.
Technology as a servant, not a sovereign. That is a phrase worth writing down, because it is so incredibly easy for those roles to reverse. We think we are using the algorithm, but the algorithm is actually shaping our behavior.
Exactly. And the book acknowledges that digital tools are fantastic for certain logistical tasks. They can translate resources globally in seconds. They can facilitate coordination across time zones. They can gather audiences with unprecedented speed.
Sure.
But Velazquez draws a hard, non-negotiable line. He explicitly states in the text, quote, "Technology can initiate contact. It cannot replicate incarnational presence."
Incarnational presence. Let's translate that for the listener. In a world where we're increasingly talking to AI chatbots for therapy, and we're watching algorithmically generated videos for education, what does the absence of incarnational presence actually mean for us?
It means that the deeply human, nuanced elements of mentorship and discipleship cannot be automated. An AI can write a technically perfect sermon. It can generate a flawless 90-day reading plan.
Yeah, we see that all the time now.
But it cannot offer pastoral discernment based on knowing a person's history. It cannot sit across a table with someone in their profound grief and offer empathetic, silent listening.
It doesn't have a soul.
It doesn't.
No.
It cannot provide spirit-led counsel or incarnate meaning, literally embody in the flesh the love, patience, and grace required to truly mentor another human being.
It's the difference between downloading a high-resolution map of a mountain and actually having a seasoned guide walk the treacherous trail with you, pulling you up when you stumble. A map doesn't care if you fall. A guide does.
That's a great analogy. The book argues that the credibility of any movement in a highly digitized, AI-driven world will depend entirely on its embodied authenticity. People are going to crave real, messy, physical presence because it's the one thing technology cannot counterfeit.
You know, to synthesize all of this for you, the listener, Velazquez's entire framework in Called Out of Darkness to Light is a powerful, urgent call to shift our fundamental paradigms. He is asking us to consistently choose depth over display, to value character over charisma, to prioritize physical, authentic presence over building expansive digital platforms.
Absolutely.
Whether you are a brand new believer trying to figure out what comes next, or a veteran church leader feeling totally burnt out by the metric-driven treadmill, or frankly, just someone fascinated by the psychology of modern leadership and how to build resilient communities, this shift from visible metrics to internal vitality is profound.
It fundamentally changes how you measure a successful life. It strips away the anxiety of performance and replaces it with the quiet confidence of abiding.
And to leave you with a final provocative thought, to mull over something from the source material that perfectly caps off this entire discussion about metrics and success, I want to hand it over to my co-host.
In the preface of the book, Velazquez points out a striking paradox found in the Gospel of Mark. If you look at the historical life of Jesus, he had immense, massive crowds following him. Tens of thousands of people gathered to see him.
Huge visibility.
Right. Yet strategically, he chose to invest a disproportionate amount of his time in just 12 men. And within that group, he invested even more intimately in an inner circle of just 3. Now, if you are evaluating this strategy through the lens of modern visibility metrics, it seems incredibly inefficient.
Right. Why waste time on 3 guys when you have an audience of thousands?
Exactly. And sure enough, by the time Jesus is at the cross, that massive crowd had thinned out entirely. It was gone. But the movement didn't depend on the fleeting applause of the many. It depended on the deep, enduring transformation of the few.
Wow. That completely dismantles everything we were taught about scaling an audience.
So, as you go about your week, navigating the algorithms and the pressure to perform, I want you to consider this question based on the author's framework. In an era where we are absolutely desperate to broadcast our message to thousands, to maximize our reach and optimize our visibility, what if the true, enduring measure of your life's success isn't the size of the crowd you can gather, but the depth of transformation you cultivate in just 2 or 3 people?
What a profound question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the metrics, keep unlearning the hustle, and keep diving deep. We will catch you next time.